Most designers subscribe to the concept of proportion being everything on a car. And for most cars, proportion has been evolutionary. From small cars to honking luxury sedans, there's always been a fashion element to their proportions. Long overhangs, short roof, low uppers, vertical uppers. They've all been in and out of style numerous times on mainstream cars. But there's one vehicle type that refuses to evolve: the proportion of a sports car. Proportions on sports cars have remained amazingly consistent for well over a century. Back in 1905, a company called American Underslung started building cars that visually stood out from other early automobiles. This was a result of the chassis and frame actually hung under the front and rear axles rather than placed atop them. Additionally, the engine and transmission were positioned down well between the frame rails, again, instead of being perched on top. This architecture, along with 40-inch wheels, yep, double dubs, gave the American Underslung, especially the two-passenger Roadster, a decidedly sporty profile. After the American Underslung, several sporting cars of the early 1900s, the Mercer Raceabout and Stutz Series A Bearcat Roadster most notably, were little more than engine stands with wheels and seats. Visually, they were dominated by their engine mass, spoked wheels, and two seats positioned almost on top of the rear axle. This was the beginning of the long hood, short trunk proportion that defines sports cars to this very day. With what we consider sports cars starting exclusively as open vehicles, the whole idea of upper mass was a non-issue. But with the onset of streamlining in the 1930s, closed sports cars started to appear. Like their predecessors, a long hood telegraphed the car was of a serious sporting nature. And without exception, the roofs of these early examples were low, very low, and placed far, far back in the car. This is how the long hood, low roofline became synonymous with sports cars as well. In the 1960s, when mid-engine configurations were starting to appear in production cars, the influence of traditional sports car proportion continued beyond reason. And this is no better illustrated than the Lamborghini P400 Miura. The transverse V12 two-seat coupe debuted at the 1966 Geneva Auto Show to rave reviews. And while the Miura was incredibly distinctive, in side profile it had a long, one-piece tilt-up hood and fender assembly that concealed little more than the car's suspension, fuel tank, radiator, and a spare tire. The Miura could have ignored the long hood idiom, and it didn't. The world is a better place for it, too. One car aggressively violated the sports car proportion: the M100 Elan. Lotus packaged the front-wheel drive powertrain in an architecture that barely had a hood and put the occupants pretty much dead center when viewed from the side. It's blasphemous. While new sports cars like the C7 Corvette and the latest 911 from Porsche redefine levels of performance and driving character, nobody is trying to redefine sports car proportions. And that, in my far from humble opinion, is a very, very good thing. For Autoline Design Handbook, I'm Jim Hall.